Let's introduce this next session. This discussion is titled, How to Give Workers the Resources and Opportunities They Need to Thrive and Do Their Best at Work. The featured speaker for this session is Jessica Swank, the Chief People Officer of Box, the fast-growing content management company based in Redwood City. She's been with Box for about 5 years and has previously held leadership roles at Blue Bottle Coffee, Aruba, and Hewlett-Packard. She's passionate about creating compelling cultures that enable employees and organizations to thrive and where employees feel welcomed and celebrated for who they are. Jessica holds a bachelor's degree in human and organizational development from Vanderbilt University. Interviewing Jessica will be Erin Griffith, a reporter for the New York Times. Erin reports on technology startups and venture capital, landing many conceptual scoops about Silicon Valley trends and culture. Previously, she was a journalist for Fortune magazine, where her column called Boom with a View won several awards. Her writing also appeared in The Atlantic, the LA Times, and the Times of London, among others. She has a bachelor's degree in journalism from Ohio University. Please welcome these two very accomplished people to the stage.
Good morning. So Jess here took her role at Box as head of HR in March of 2020. That was kind of a fraught moment. HR suddenly became a very difficult job, a very different job. She had to create policies for remote work, for COVID, figuring out also how to address a lot of the social and political issues that now seem to be bubbling up on a weekly basis. So these are things that all companies are figuring out. We're eager to hear from her about how Box has worked through some of these issues, what has worked, what hasn't, and what's still in work in progress. So let's just start with return to the office. What's Box's policy, and how did you arrive there?
Awesome. Well, thank you, Erin, and hello. Good morning. Great to be here, and a huge thanks from Day One team. It just really honor to be here and talk about such important topics, because I think we're all grappling with this. So, as Erin mentioned, I'm at Box. I lead our People and Communities organization, and as she said, I took this role on literally, March 2nd. Everybody remember where they were March 2020, right? We thought it was going to be a week. We thought it was going to be 2 weeks of the shutdown. Little did we know, 3 years later, here we are. So getting back to your question, Erin, on return to office. So we were pre-pandemic very much a in-person type of organization. We had about 20% of what we call our boxers who worked remotely, but most of these were because of the role they had. So they were, in the field, they were sales, they were customer support, customer success types of roles. And overnight, like all of us, we had to then go entirely virtual. And so we have been kind of then on a journey to figure out what do we want that to look like now going forward. And so we have really embraced the hybrid approach, which I think honestly is the most difficult one because, in some ways it was easier when everybody was fully remote or fully in person. But we're very committed to really thinking about how do we create the policies, the programs, the structure where everybody can be thriving both personally and professionally no matter where they are around the world. So we have been really aligned on flexibility. How do we create flexibility in what we do, but also intentionality? So we have determined where we are coming in, where we've said IRL days, so in real life days, that are every Tuesday, Thursday, to say, hey, if you're going to come into the office, and we encourage you, our expectation is that we want you in the office. But when you do, we want you to be able to collaborate, connect with those that you work with and colleagues. So that is our official policy as of now.
Is it working?
I would say yes, and we're learning, we're experimenting. I think we're all in this like grand experiment. I think one thing that is working really well is the conversations and the feedback that we hear. You know, for example, yesterday I ran into somebody who I hadn't seen a long time. You know, we had an impromptu conversation in the hallway. By the end of the day, we had solved an issue that had been kind of lingering, and it was so I think the speed of sometimes decision making, those relationships are incredibly important. So I think that's working. But it's challenging, and we're still trying to figure this out, right? Of what's working, what's not working, how do we evolve to make it.
Do you have any, what are some examples of things that you learned that don't work?
Don't work. And I'd love to hear any other opinions here. So a couple things that have not worked so well. So, you know, during the pandemic, we decided we have quarterly, what we call all hands, where, you know, kind of I think most companies do. And we had gone totally virtual, and we saw the feedback, the engagement actually jumped. And so when we started coming back, we said, okay, we're gonna try this. We're gonna bring people into the office, but we still wanna be able to have a really effective virtual experience. Well, one thing we learned is coming into the office to watch a screen, that's not actually really engaging. That actually isn't part of the value proposition. And so we're gonna actually revert back to having our all hands entirely virtual rather than trying to have this hybrid. So really being intentional about when and how we bring people together.
One of the things that we had spoken about earlier that I thought was interesting too is this idea of manager enablement. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I personally very much believe that the managers and our leaders are so critical to our success. And yet I feel for managers. I don't know how many of you are managers out there, right? But it's hard right now. You're pulled in so many different directions, trying to lead, trying to do your job, but also at the same time trying to, kind of be abreast and deliver in your day-to-day. So what we're really intentional about, again, is to try and have manager enablement. So we have what we call a monthly manager power hour, where we bring all of our managers together to do education, awareness. We have what we call some of our monthly leadership sessions, where again, we bring people, all of our leaders, which are directors and above, together to talk about what in the business, what are our priorities, make sure there's alignment. And then we have, Slack channels. We have a lot of resources for the managers, again, trying to help them be as successful as possible.
I want to talk a little bit about how employees have reacted to some of the policies, the RTO policy and other things that you've rolled out, because I think we have seen this interesting shift back and forth between like who holds the power now. And some companies are, demanding butts and seats, come back to the office, and employees are saying I'll quit or revolting. Other companies are doing layoffs, and so people are kind of coming back out of fear. How are you gauging that, and how are employees reacting to these things?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and I think it's very dynamic over the past couple of years to see the shifts. Bless you. I would say overall, right, we have gotten actually very positive feedback. So we have an annual Boxer experience survey where we had 94% of our Boxers say that they were essentially, satisfied with our approach to date. That was last October. We will have another survey this year, so we'll see. Anecdotally, though, we get a lot of feedback of support of the flexibility. So, for example, I was talking to one of our, kind of a long tenured Boxer who's, a top engineer. He's here in the Bay Area. He was like, I love coming into the office. I now have, 2 kids and a mom with cancer, and I'm just, as much as I want to come into the office, it's really incredibly difficult because I live, East Bay, and the commute's an hour and a half. So I think we're trying to be flexible and accommodating, so again, people can thrive personally and professionally, but at the same time, make sure that we're creating opportunities. We're also finding that different populations are, affected differently. So, I think caretaking, we just heard about it. I know I have a daughter. I know I have, elderly parents. There's a lot that I think all of us are juggling. So we're trying to be really thoughtful about that approach.
So, okay, flexibility is the key here. And just wanted to hit really quickly on a practical question, which is like, how has this affected hiring? Are you hiring only people who can come into the office a few days? Are you very flexible and open, or how are you, what's your policy there?
Yeah, hiring. So it depends, I would say. So it depends on role, where some of our roles, so we have some roles that are in-office roles. We've deemed them that way. Our workplace services, for example, they are in the office. We have a number of other roles where we're just saying, hey, we want, again, this kind of hybrid flexibility. We want you in the office 2, 3, 4 days a week. And then other roles, we're saying, hey, it's a unique skill set, experience, whatnot. We can hire you remotely and you can, be effective wherever that is. So it depends.
What's the feedback from hiring managers on that? I mean, is it easier, harder? Are they pushing for one thing or another?
Again, very role dependent. I think what we've actually found is a number of our candidates, we weren't sure about how they would respond, and a lot of them want to come back into the office, especially we're finding earlier in career, right, to get that mentorship, to get that community in person. But again, I think what we're trying to really sell is the flexibility.
Mm-hmm. All right, I want to switch gears and talk a little bit about the macro environment. Box has put more of an effort into something called psychological safety of employees. Can you explain what that means and what you guys are doing in that area?
Yeah, so I think this is, there's many challenges, in my opinion, from the pandemic. I would say one of the silver linings is that I think it helped bring kind of humanity and heart back into leadership, into companies. And so what we're really trying to do at Box is create an environment where everyone can thrive. So our core values, we have 7 of them. One of them is bring your blank self to work. So again, that concept of we want to create diverse, inclusive environments. We want that trust. So we put a lot of focus on the trust, assuming good intent in what we do. We put a lot of focus on internal communications. In some ways, we probably over-communicate. We have a weekly Friday lunch where, everything from our CEO to our leadership team, and we talk again about open decisions. So I think my big belief, Erin, and again, very interested how other people are thinking about this, but is that opportunity to feel safe, to feel heard, to feel seen. We all have good days, we all have bad days, and again, that team effort of it's not just about an individual, but it's also about coming together and supporting each other through all the ups and downs that life inevitably has.
I'd love to hear some more examples of how what that actually looks like. And one thing that we had talked about was you guys rely on your ERGs a lot.
Yes.
Can you talk about those and maybe what you guys do that might be unique compared to other companies or go beyond what's standard?
Yeah, so we actually call them ERCs, Employee Resource Communities, because again, we have a big emphasis on communities. We have 11 of them. And so, yeah, we look at, I think we've all been just bombarded with all of the issues that I think many of us are grappling with externally. And so we actually put together a matrix on decision making of when and how do we respond to an external event. And so we rely a lot on our ERCs, on our internal communities, to help also be that voice, to create that safe space, to create that that psychological safety. So we have, listening circles. We've done a lot. So after, a number of major events, we might have a circle where we bring people together, again, with that spirit of, hey, come to learn, come to listen, not necessarily come to persuade and, kind of being closed-minded. We also are really focused on trying to provide the resources, again, no matter where you are. We don't want them just in our offices. We want anybody, no matter where you are around the world, to be able to access our resources. So some of our benefits, we've increased Modern Health. Big shout out, we love them for coaching sessions. So we offer that to all of our Boxers, and we've also then just expanded that to dependents, because again, we believe the family health and well-being is also incredibly important.
Can you go back to the matrix for just a second? Because I did think that was really interesting. Essentially, when a major political or social news event happens, you guys have essentially like a flow chart of how you decide how to respond. Can you just talk a little bit more about that? Because I thought that sounded really interesting.
Yeah, it's a little bit of, I would say, art and science. So we look at it by what are our business priorities. We look at it based on our values, and then we look at it based on geographies and the impact to our Boxers around the world. And so some events, George Floyd, we had our CEO, Erin talk about it because we thought it was so important. Other events, we've had our local ERCs then again lead some either, announcements or communications, hold listening circles, provide that support. So it's a little dependent again on what the issue is and how we feel it's going to impact us.
it's a lot to stay on top of also. And this is sort of a new development. I mean, some managers or CEOs, I think, might not see the value of spending time and resources on that kind of thing. And, I think you had mentioned others are, sometimes managers give the feedback that it's exhausting to keep up with. Could you just give a quick pitch for why this matters?
Yeah. I imagine that many of you, because you're sitting in this room, also agree that it matters. But I think that one, to me, I think about it of like sustainability, both sustainability of people, right? Because that ability to invest in the wellness and the well-being of our employees is so incredibly important. And I think trying to take a long-term view of that, right? You might be able to get more productivity or more out of, an employee in a very short amount of time, but over the long view, and if you invest in them and if you invest in, again, as a team, coming together to create, really phenomenal, both we talk about the what, delivering results, but the how, living by our values, that we believe that if we can do both of those things and invest in our employees, that ultimately it's better for business. So we're, again, really, really trying to have this, hey, what you can do good and have it be really good for business at the same time.
Got it. So making the business case for this. I think it's sort of interesting that we're seeing this growing movement of, so-called anti-woke people who are directly opposing DEI efforts. We just had this news last week that Texas is banning DEI efforts in public colleges. I'm curious how much of the work now is justifying it versus doing it. And just from your perspective, does it feel like we're taking a step backward?
Yeah, this is an important conversation. So I'll answer it kind of big picture and then specifically for Box. So I think on one hand, I think back to, when I was still entering the workforce and earlier in my career, how far we've come and the conversations that right now that we're having versus then. I mean, I remember, early day when I was interviewing somebody and they essentially asked me to go get them coffee and said, pretty much laughed when I told them that I was actually the person interviewing them. And they were like, that's impossible, right? And so I think going from that and being told, I remember also one time when I was told that if I cared so much about people, I should go work for a nonprofit. Right, I think that has evolved over the years. That said, I think we still have a long, long way to go. And so I think for Box, one of the things I love about Box, our culture, is our values. And so I think the focus on creating a diverse, equitable, a place where everyone can thrive has been part of our values. Again, like I mentioned, bring your blank self to work, make mom proud, which is one of our values. Those have been tenets of who we are. So when, all the news and the focus on DEI, we were somewhat steady in our approach. And now when I think there is a little bit, you're hearing some of these changes in the news, that our approach actually hasn't changed. So our commitment to really thinking about bringing diversity and belonging in every single step of our life cycle, from our hiring to, partnering with, like a multiverse or, some of the focus on diverse pipeline to thriving and really, mentoring to even beyond when we have Boxers leave, making sure that that is part of, kind of our ongoing. Looking at our customers is incredibly important. We know that we want to, this is becoming more and more important to our customers, our suppliers, our partners. So I personally think that, I love the news and I love reporters, but sometimes I think, that story, I think there's a lot of companies where it actually hasn't changed that much.
I mean, that's very heartening to hear. We just have a minute left, and maybe I'll just ask you one last big picture question. Given the dramatic changes that we've gone through over the last 3 years, maybe very quickly you could just sum up what you think have been the best and worst impacts on the way we work.
Yeah, I mentioned it before. I think one of the best impacts is, again, bringing more heart, more humility, more humanity to all we do, right? How many of us have been on a Zoom call where a kid or a dog or, life happens, and I don't think we're gonna go back. I think one of the challenges is just, as we navigate this going forward, right? How do we continue to not lose some of the benefits from the pandemic and the working from home, and how do we continue to just be innovative, creative, and create new solutions?
Amazing. More heart, more humility, more humanity. I love it. Please join me in thanking Jess.
Thank you. Thank you, Erin.